My name is Cedric Labor Jr. I am a Pregones ensemble member and your host for our series, Spotlight, showcasing creatives at work. This episode features my fellow ensemble members, Yaraní del Valle Piñero and Shadia Fairuz. They both share insights into the creation of our acclaimed production, Aloha Boricua. Conceived and directed by Jorge B. Merced in 2009, Aloha Boricua is made up of story, verse, and song. It is an evocative and sometimes puzzling exploration of history and of the ways in which migrant experience and cultural heritage are distilled, preserved, or turned on their heads. The inspiration for the production is double. On one hand, the formidable journey of Puerto Ricans to the islands of Hawaii at the very tail end of the 19th century. On the other, the exuberant literature of Manuel Ramos Otero with its queer turns, detours, and multiple voices. Born in Manatí, Puerto Rico, Manuel was a groundbreaking poet, fiction and essay writer, and the first openly gay voice in Puerto Rican literature. His short story, Vivir del Cuento, became the seed for our show, Aloha Boricua. Gracias por acompañarnos y disfruten de este episodio de Spotlight.
Hi, I'm Shadia Fairuz. I'm a New York-based singer and actor raised in Puerto Rico, and also a Pregones ensemble member.
Hi, my name is Yaraní del Valle Piñero. I'm an actor, a dancer, and an educator. I was born in New York and raised in Puerto Rico, and I'm a Pregones ensemble member. Shadia, when did you realize you wanted to be an artist?
For me, it was always part of my, let's say, DNA in a sense. You know, I was always a performer. When I was a kid, I was always doing productions in the hallway of my building. I would always sing. I played the piano, grew up playing piano. So that was really always an integral part of who I was, of my identity. And then, you know, later on, I continued my training formally through the Conservatory of Music, finally making it to New York, aspiring as an aspiring opera singer. Mm-hmm. How about you? When did you think or realize that you were meant to do this?
I think my parents and my family always knew it. It was that I was in denial for many years until I arrived as a student at the University of Puerto Rico, and I had my aha moment in an acting class with Carola Garcia. And I remember the exact moment we were doing an exercise, and I was just taking this acting course because I liked it, but I didn't know I wanted to be an actor. So I remember doing the exercise and telling my peers, oh my God, this is what I want to do with my life. So because I had the same training as you in the Coro de Niños de San Juan, mm-hmm. I thought I was going to be a singer, but then in the drama department of the University of Puerto Rico, I realized that I wanted to combine those two disciplines, music and drama. At what stage of the creation process did you join the production of Aloha Boricua?
Well, I think I joined when it was ready to be brought indoors as an official production part of their season, presentation. But I was able to see you and others perform in previous kind of snippets of it, like I don't know, was it Remojo that we did, and I was doing another piece, right? And you were doing a snippet from it, and I remember just having the greatest time seeing you. And I was like, this is so contagious. And then at some point, Jorge, he told me that that he wanted wanted me to be a part of it, and that's when I joined. I think more like in the fall. What about you?
Oh wow! I remember I joined the production in its early stages. Jorge was trying out some fragments of Cuento que me cuentan, and we had like summer stage tour around the city, and we did like a concert version mixed with narrations, and it was super fun. Mostly because my character, I really love my character, Pura Perez.
Yeah.
So yeah, very early in the stage of in the creation of Aloha, when Jorge was, creating from scratch everything.
¿Cómo se cuenta un cuento? Los cuentos no se cuentan de la nada. Por creernos el cuento, aquí llegamos a darnos cuenta que aquello era solo eso, un cuento. I always suspected I would never return to Puerto Rico. People have often asked me if I felt if I was Puerto Rican, and I've always said yes.
What character did you play in Aloha Boricua?
I was given the task to just carry that narration through the voice of Lili. I love her. She is mysterious. She is powerful. And it comes with a responsibility of also transmitting, I would say, Queen Lili Okalani as well. It had a little bit of that. And I had that like, consciousness, collective consciousness and narration element to it through the voice of Lili. How about you?
Yeah, so I portrayed Pura Perez, a character that I really love. She's this badass feminist, but she doesn't know it yet. Mm-hmm. And she took the leadership of the mutiny in the boat because these people were treated, like slaves, and their food was rotten, and everybody was hysterical. So she was a leader, and I loved it because it's a feminine character who, at the end of the play, you think about her a lot because it's, I think she symbolizes that resistance we were talking about earlier. They know they're getting to a better place, but they're not going to settle for the treatment they are being given. So this woman is an incredible character and an incredible privilege to be able to portray her. Shadia, you really know who is Lili Okalani?
Well, yeah. Well, I did not know before Aloha Boricua. That I will confess to. But she is an icon for the Hawaiian people. She was the last queen of Hawaii, right? And she represents resistance. She represents pride and power and standing up to that oppressive kind of nature that did overtake Hawaii. And she is responsible for, that, uprising and inspiring others to uprise and defend the culture of their people. And to this day, she is revered, honored, and celebrated through the culture.
But what was the most, challenging thing about portraying Lili Okalani?
working as an ensemble, as no longer as just a musician, but also as a character and embedded in through this story, and understanding that hybrid between narrator and character was something that I think I navigated through the whole run. And even when we did it again, we were still discovering who we were. And I don't know if you remember that we had at some point we established that we had a concert and we had a story to tell. And we came in and out of these characters as characters of the story and characters of concert, which kind of is what Aloha is for me. It's kind of like that hybrid of concert and storytelling all together. And just using that feminine force, to just drive a story, and I feel like that might have been the peak of maybe my kind of the story for me, my arc. I think that was probably the peak of at least Lily's arc at that moment. It was very empowering to have us three on stage just singing that.
This is the original script.
The script. Yeah.
Wow.
My goodness.
Qué memoria.
How did you feel about integrating his work into this play and how that came about? Or is there a favorite part of you? I don't know.
We were talking about the Pele moment, where you have the music, and then there's some parts of poetry that we talked. So it was that integration of the declamation of the poetry with the music. I think it was very Ramos Otero-ish, breaking everything.
Right.
The traditional poetry, and in the play we were breaking that traditional play and even the traditional score by talking and then singing.
I also feel like this was also like a collage of music. We went over so many different styles, and somehow it just came together so well. We did danza puertorriqueña. One of my favorite parts, honestly, is when she sang with Chu as well. Solo sé que solo quiero continuar a la deriva, como el barco que permanece sin sentir, frío en la orilla. Ese barco que siempre se pregunta si reconoce un puerto, si estoy vivo, estoy muerto, o tan solo
went to Hawaii with Pregones in a cultural exchange with Art Space, if I'm not mistaken. And over there, we got to train and work with PAI Foundation. So it was a very immersive process because we got to experience the reality of the Puerto Rican community in Hawaii, and also the bridges, that solidarity bridge, that the connections that we have with Hawaii and Puerto Rico. Not necessarily the Puerto Rican community in Hawaii, but Hawaii as a country has a lot of things in common with Puerto Rico, the history of the two countries. The cultural exchange happened after we premiered the play. We really got to understand it better when we got to Hawaii, and learning about the colonial situation and the process they are in that colonial history versus the point in history that Puerto Rico is right now in terms of its colonial status, and that the native Hawaiians are resisting that the same powers that be that Puerto Ricans are resisting as we speak. It was heartbreaking in a sense, and in another way it was reassuring of how our resistance has really paved the way for other countries, because when we got there, they paid tribute to Puerto Ricans. We had the goosebumps because they were telling us that the Puerto Rican people were their inspiration for their resistance, and we were like us? And you Puerto Ricans are our inspiration. You know, you've resisted 100 and something years of colonization, and yet you still have your identity, your culture, your language. And it was mind-blowing to understand that and acknowledge that Puerto Rican resistance.
No, señor, esto se acaba aquí ahora mismo. Es más, todo el mundo, arránquese la etiqueta esa, arránquensela ahora mismo, a ver cómo se las arreglan cuando lleguemos y no sepan para dónde tienen que enviarnos a cada uno. Arránquense la etiqueta esa y cuando yo les avise, ¡las tiramos por la borda! ¡Arránquese la etiqueta, que estamos en el meollo y ahora es que se va a armar! ¿En qué quedamos, señores? ¿No quieren vivos o muertos? Viajando por alta mar, sin comida y aramiento. ¿En qué quedamos, señores?
You know, in the sense of both countries being, you know, victim or a product of colonialism, of imperialism, but still being resilient and having that resistance and pride and to conserve, as you said, our identity is something to celebrate, which I do think Aloha Boricua does.
Aloha Boricua celebrates the identity, the resistance, and also, I think we were talking about this earlier today, and also celebrates the country you make of yourself when you migrate to another country, and how you bring with you your country, and you can build. What comes to my mind is a poem of Mariposa that she says, "I was not born in Puerto Rico, but Puerto Rico was born in me." So a lot of diaspora, our diaspora in other parts of the world and third generation of Puerto Ricans have that feeling of bringing their country to whatever part of the world. And also, I think Aloha also celebrates oral history, because we are talking about un cuento, a story, you know, and how repeating those stories and those narrations, as Manuel Ramos Otero put it, you know, how that oral story is also intrinsically part of the story. It's not a written story,
Yeah.
but it's part of our story.
Right.
When you think of history, you think of books, a library, and this was a historical play.
Mm-hmm.
And how people came to see this play thinking that they were going to be entertained. Yes, they were going to be entertained, but they left the theater knowing a little bit more about history and Puerto Rican history too.
Mm-hmm.
And history sometimes it doesn't lie in books. It lies in oral history.
Mm-hmm.
And in a theater, you can go to a theater and to think that you can learn more about who you are, where you come from, and what your people or your country has been through by watching a play. Really, you can do that? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not boring. It's pretty amazingly entertaining.
Fun.
And
Exactly.
fun. Yeah.
Exactly.
Esta es la trayectoria que te decía que se inicia en un barco rumbo tras brisas, que se inicia en un barco rumbo tras brisas.
What would you say is the biggest takeaway from this show for you, from being a part of Aloha Boricua?
What I take of this play is the ability humankind has to rebuild itself despite struggles and misery, injustice. The biggest lesson is that migrant story, that story that repeats itself not only with the Puerto Ricans, but with many of our Latinx brothers and sisters and other communities that have to leave their countries, their families, to recreate that country elsewhere. And that's the biggest lesson I take with it. And also in the creative process, it was kind of the similar because we were doing so many things and we were discovering the text while we were creating the play, that in a sense we have to support each other. It's a sense of solidarity and family we have within our communities and abroad.
For me, like one of the biggest takeaways of the Aloha Boricua experience, I had a lot of like questions about where I belonged and where do I belong between New York and Puerto Rico? Where am I going to belong to, or how am I going to belong? You know, I was still like in that search, probably still am. I don't know if that'll ever end. But Jorge Merced, the director, writer, creator of this piece, we were having this conversation about patria. ¿Y qué es patria? What is patria? And I was still thinking, had that struggle inside of me of leaving Puerto Rico was still very fresh and what that meant for me. And I'm never going to forget when he, with such ease, he told me, la patria la llevas tú y la haces tú donde sea. You take that with you. You bring that. It never dies. You can still carry that with you with honor wherever you go. Bueno, Yaraní, I remember some stories about el coquí when you went to Hawaii.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing to arrive to this country in the other part of the world and to listen to that little creature that we Puerto Ricans hold close to our heart as a national symbol.
Mm-hmm.
So I got news for you. The coquí is in Hawaii. And for them, it's
not the same.
It's not the same.
It doesn't
that-
vibe the same way, right?
Yeah, it's not the same because for them it's a pest. You know, it's all over the island, and for us it holds a different symbol and a different significance.
Right.
We were crying when we listened to the coqui in Hawaii. I cannot explain to you the feeling of knowing that other Puerto Ricans got to listen to that creature, knowing that they were never going to go back to their country.
Mm.
So a piece of their land was there,
Right.
and it accompanied them, and it's part of the story because Mon talks about that, about, you know, it's at the end of the play when he listens to the coqui and how he knows that very much probably all of his friends would have loved to listen to the coqui.
Right.
It was a very magical moment in the play, and we experienced that
Right.
real life.
They didn't feel the same way about the coqui than we did, and it kind of also resembles how maybe our journey as Puerto Ricans to Hawaii too did have that kind of parallel experience, right? In Hawaii, and I'm just, what I can speak to is that moment in the show where the coqui starts emerging and we start hearing, and how the audience in the show received it, and I could sense the tears. I could sense the emotion that the coqui kind of created in the audience at that moment.
Yeah, it's very meta theater because the audience was listening to the coqui, and we are not in Puerto Rico. The
Mhm.
audience is far away from home,
Right.
and it's that connection with the main character. What he's feeling, the audience is feeling it too
Mhm.
at the same time,
Right.
because we're listening to a coqui. We're listening to a coqui in a theater in New York. So I could, you know, one can imagine what that character would have felt listening to that creature far away from home.
In
It's
the show.
beautiful because I know that Pregones' audience is very diverse, but you know that there's the Puerto Rican audience, and for that audience to come to Pregones and listen to the coqui is like coming home.
Mhm.
You know, this is home for most of our Puerto Rican audience. This is home too.
This is patria.
This is patria.